Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is very straightforward. It restores a bipartisan provision to the bill, one that was actually approved by Congress and signed into law by President Obama. In 2009, Congress approved the King Cove land exchange under the condition that it be found to be in the national interest by the Secretary of the Interior. After a transparent four-year review that included over 70,000 public comments and 130 public meetings, Secretary Jewell ultimately concluded that it was not in the national interest and the land exchange was not approved. Nevertheless, the legislation that was approved and signed into law in 2009 with Democratic and Republican support included language that, should the road be approved, would have required the state of Alaska, federal agencies, and local residents to develop a mitigation plan for the road so that impacts to migratory birds, wildlife, and wetlands are minimized. The land exchange language that was passed by Congress in 2009 is similar to the legislation that we are considering today, with a few notable exceptions, including the removal of the section requiring this environmental mitigation plan. It is common practice for any new road construction project to include an environmental mitigation plan, especially a road through such a sensitive area. I urge adoption of my common sense amendment to reinsert this bipartisan language, and I reserve the balance of my time. I think it's important to keep in mind that the lands that this road seeks to cross are federally protected public lands. They are managed and protected on behalf of all Americans to specifically protect wildlife habitat. And as such, when changes like this are being debated, all Americans have the right to register their opinion. They are also designated wilderness, the highest level of protection that the American people can bestow upon a piece of public land, and we in Congress are stewards of that mandate. The road proposed by this legislation could do irreparable harm to the fragile environment of this wildlife refuge if mitigation steps are not taken. As the Department of the Interior stated in 2013, this area is, quote, a globally significant landscape that supports an abundance and diversity of wildlife unique to the refuge that years of analysis shows us would be irretrievably damaged by construction and operation of the proposed road, unquote. The department also found that construction of the road would lead to, quote, significant degradation of irreparable ecological resources that would not be offset by the protection of other lands to be received under an exchange, unquote. My amendment simply reinserts bipartisan language that was approved by Congress and signed into law by 2009 that will help mitigate some, but not all, of the negative environmental impacts in the event that the road is constructed. Thank you, and I continue to reserve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to first remind my distinguished colleague from Alaska, who I know cares very deeply about his constituents, that in 2009 he did vote for the omnibus land package that included the language that I today would like to see become part of the legislation before us today. Mr. Chairman, my amendment is simple. It restores bipartisan language that was passed by Congress and that Congressman Young supported and signed into law on similar legislation authorizing this land exchange back in 2009. The road through Isenbeck National Wildlife Refuge is expected to have a significant detrimental impact on lands that are protected for the benefit of all Americans. This amendment will help mitigate some, but not all of those impacts in the event that the road is constructed. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment, and I yield back.